So ordinarily in our normal life, these forces are kept at bay by the faculty of reason, developed reason. Of course, reason in most of us is at the mercy of vital desires, etc. So we justify everything. But if reason can truly disengage itself and we can be taught how to think truly, I think this is an important aspect in education. It's free thinking must be also accompanied with an ability to think truly. If we don't know how to think, then we'll just become a jostling marketplace of all kinds of thoughts coming from all kinds of places. To learn to think truly, to learn to think freely, these two go together. So that's a whole field of education. And yet, these forces are stronger than reason. That's why they are called as infra-rational, irrational forces. When they arise, it's a common knowledge. Reason doesn't work. Reason, in fact, after a while will obey them. When a person is in a fit of anger, don't try to rationally argue. Because the person will give you such a counter reason that you will not know what to say. And the worst counter reason is, well, this is how I feel. That's the end of the story. So, because they are irrational forces, but after a while when the storm has abated, that is the time that one is in another state of mind, when one can talk about it. But during that phase, they are just like a storm that is raging. Or a power which can really overpower them, conquer them, even change them. That of course is a power which is rarest of rare in any human being. It is the power of love. But of course not love which we understand, or the power of peace, like Sri Aurobindo, that power of peace which could calm even the elements. But reason can only keep them at bay. It can tie them, but after a while, just as every day we have to let off the dog to have his whatever move around. If you don't do it, he'll start barking. So what the reason does, there is a time when it lets them off. They have their say. And then when it is dealing with humanity in a civilizational way, it keeps them, it learns to keep it quiet. Learns to at least hold them. Afflicting the daylight and alarming night. Invading at will his outer tenement. So now comes that next step. Initially, what does the reason do? Allows them time. When they can, these forces can have a revel and, have their say. But at other times, reason tries to keep them at bay, daylight. But there comes a time when they begin to afflict both these states of consciousness. Invading at will his outer tenement, the stark glooms, grisly, dire inhabitants, mounting into God's light, all light perturb. This is how we see here in our scriptures about Ravana destroying the yagnas, or other Hiranyakashipu taking the earth and putting it inside water. Hiranyaksh, not Hiranyakashipu. Putting it into water, submerging it. So they perturb all light. They create chaos and disturbance in God's world. It's their work. Look at these words, grisly, gloom. This is the action of these forces. They create a sense of horror, a sense of deep, dark depression, despair. The mother says that despair is the tail of the devil. If you allow it, the whole fellow will come inside. Whatever be the situation, despair should not be allowed. It's their work. They are waiting for us to, and then they will perturb everything. All they have touched or seen, they make their own. Must have seen that, when we go to bazaar, there are different kinds of people who buy things. There are those who just see. They don't really buy, they're not much interested. Some appreciate, others will touch it. They must touch everything. Whether they are buying or not, it's not important. But they must touch everything. Now these fellows go one step further. Whatever they have touched is theirs. So if you allow them entry into the house, they will touch it and take it. If you allow them in their thoughts, they will make your thoughts their own. They will take it that it's our right. Like what happens with tenants. Of course, tenants are good people. But if you allow a tenant in the house, after 1 year, 2 years, he says, well, whose house? It's my house. The law of the land will support him. You can raise the rent. You cannot snatch away the house. It becomes his house. He will pay you rent. After some time, not even rent. After some time, he'll say, give me so much money, then I'll vacate the house. This is exactly how these forces work and why one has to be so careful with one's life. In nature's basement lodge, mind's passages fill. So they come seeking a small little space. Please allow me this much space. You take pity and say, okay. Then slowly they'll say, okay, since anyways you have allowed me this much space and I can use your bathroom, can I use your kitchen also? Just, once in a while I'll cook. Okay, fine, use the kitchen. Then, what, I need to sleep a little. Can I stretch my legs in your bedroom? Okay, fine. Then by then, he is very comfortable with the house. So you have gone out for 2 hours. When you come, you will see that he is having a party in the house with all his friends. Nowadays, this system has started, what is called as couch surfing. I don't know many of you are aware or not. Couch surfing. It's where there are couch surfing communities. So couch surfers will go to anybody's place, and if you are part of that link, so you can stay in anybody's. You may not know the person except as a couch surfer, and you go there. Let's say somebody goes from here to Tokyo and there is a couch surfing. You have a friend there, so you can just stay in the person's house. So once I was asking that how does it work? Supposing the person is let's say smokes and drinks and you don't like it, so what do you do? No, you can tell them that, please leave the house. I see it's so easy and so simple. It doesn't sound so simple as that, but maybe it works with a certain kind of. But that's how they come. They come as couch surfers. And then after a while, that's why it's so important even to know what books we are reading. We don't understand. They have a tremendous influence. And once we allow these things, they grow and can create havoc. Disrupt thought slings and musing sequences. This is how one of the findings in some types of severe mental disorders is that thought slings gets disrupted. And they can act even on the brain and disconnect thoughts from one to another. Break through the soul stillness with noise and cry. You're sitting in meditation, all is quiet, and suddenly like a storm they will pass by. And suddenly the mind is carried away in their whole drift. Unless one is anchored very deep. So this is how they do. Or they call the inhabitants of the abyss, invite the instincts to forbidden joys. So once we allow them, then next, as I said, 2 hours you are out, while they have already invited all the friends for party. And when you enter, you don't know you have entered a wrong house. Then you come out and see, yes, your name is written there. But whatever is happening inside is no more yours. A laughter wake of dread demonic mirth, and with nether riot and revel shake life's floor. Reminds us of typical nightclub dancings. Look at the line. Riot and revel shake life's floor. So that's what these forces come and do. Impotent to quell his terrible prisoners. Initially they were prisoners. They were held in Enterden. They had their own place. All that we gave them was little food. Now they are broken free. Appalled the householder helpless sits above. Taken from him his house is his no more. So then they come and say, well, this is my house. It's just that whole night we are going to party. Maybe you can go to your friend's place and sleep out there. Tomorrow we'll... Please clear up everything. You come back and see everything is in a mess. That's how they come and occupy the house. It's a very... This state is described also in Book 2, Canto 7 and 8. Where Sri Aurobindo says that a time comes when these forces can inhabit so much that the soul leaves and only a body and mind are left to live and die. It's very... he is bound and forced, a victim of the play. So he becomes now the victim. He is put in chains. There was a movie long back it had come. Many movies have been made on these lines. 36 Ghante. I don't know whether anyone has seen or not. It's an old movie, Hindi movie, but very good thriller. Where three fellows who have broken free from a jail enter a house and they come seeking shelter. But slowly, all these people are forced into one place. They become the prisoners. And these criminals become the owners of the house. So they are forced. Or else, or allured, joys in the mad and mighty din. Or they will say, why, see, look, anyways you are going to be prisoner. If you want, you can enjoy, come and have a drink with us. So sometimes people get into that also. They go into states which are very abnormal states of happiness, but they are not really happiness. They are a riot and revel of a demonic mirth. His nature's dangerous forces have arisen and hold at will a rebel's holiday. How beautifully, rebel's holiday. He will do all the things that are told not to be done. There is another kind of holiday which we see in the ashram context. Nice picnics, well organized, decent, you go to lake, nice food, nice, you go around and come back. It's a nice picnic, very decent. But rebel's holiday is, well, these people have planned, today we are going to enjoy, and they get a permission. Then they will do everything that is contrary, which will be dangerous, which will be horrifying. So rebel's holiday. Aroused from the darkness where they crouched in the depths, prisoned from the sight, they can be held no more. His nature's impulses are now his lords. So we know this, and it's a very sad, unfortunate thing to happen. And there are people who even go to the extent that they feel like not only compulsive lying and compulsive stealing, but they compulsively must hurl abuses. They feel very uncomfortable unless they hurl abuses. Or they throw ill will. I am sure none of you have seen, this really Mother's Grace, my professional hazard, I have to see it. But there are people like that. Completely the impulses are mastered. The impulses master them. Once quelled or wearing spacious names and vests, infernal elements, demon powers are there. They were always there. But they were wearing nice little names and nice little vests. Deceptive faces. Now they are completely let loose. Man's lower nature hides these awful guests. Their vast contagion grips sometimes man's world. An awful insurgence overpowers man's soul. We saw what happened during the Second World War, Hitler and all the cohorts. And then of course we see now ISIS and many others in the name of God. What kind of slaying, what kind of things they do. They enjoy in it. Dragging what happened in Paris bombing. India, of course, we have been facing these attacks. And it's so strange that they almost enjoy these kind of deeds. They take drugs. In ISIS, they actually use this drug called Capitain. It's a drug which gives a high. So they feel on top of the world. Even this Kasab and company, they all had these drugs. Drugs which make you feel high, as if you are near to God. Such deceptive things. And then you get very energetic. You can survive on little food. So all these powers, they all go together. In house and house the huge uprising grows. Hell's companies are loosed to do their work. Into the earth base they break out from all doors, invade with bloodlust and the will to slay, and fill with horror and carnage God's fair world. This is the reason why there is so much. Pain and suffering are part of life, but this kind of a carnage, massacre, horror, perversity that we see today, or at all times in some way or the other it has been there, that is because of these infernal elements which are hidden. So, what is the solution? That Sri Aurobindo will give us later. The first solution, of course, is to find the secret soul, this what Savitri discovers, and strengthen it. Death and his hunters stalk a victim earth. The terrible angel smites at every door. The terrible angel, of course, is death. In a certain sense, he is an angel. He comes to give release. And yet he is terrible. But now what he is doing? He is let loose. He has his place. He has his place that, well, when people grow old in a natural course, they must change over. Nature will do a complete organ transplant. You have a chance to live your life again. Zindagi aayegi dobara. All that. But what this angel does, terrible angel, it starts smiting when death companies are let loose. That power which originally was meant to just keep a balance of earth, to even give a release to the old, the weary, the sick, it begins to fill God's world with carnage and massacre. And awful laughter mocks at the world's pain, and massacre and torture grin at heaven. All is the prey of the destroying force. Creation rocks and trembles top and base. This evil nature housed in human hearts, a foreign inhabitant, a dangerous guest. It's not originally meant to be. Human beings are not meant to be like this. But once it is let loose, even if it is allowed a moment, a dangerous guest, the soul that harbors it, it can dislodge. Then if you try to talk about nice things and look, this is sinful, this is dangerous, don't do this, it's gone, because the soul which receives the light, that's what when Gandhiji told Sri Aurobindo, not Sri Aurobindo, he sent a letter that we will meet Hitler with non-violence. He can come and occupy our hearts and homes if he likes, but he cannot conquer our hearts. Sri Aurobindo said, he doesn't know what he is speaking and to whom he is speaking. Hitler will be very happy to receive such an invitation. That's why when Subhas Bose went and shook hands with Hitler and formed an alliance with Japan, Sri Aurobindo and the mother were very unhappy with this action. He said, he is a patriot, but what is he doing? If the Japanese come, they will never leave this country. You just can't dislodge them. And on the other side, Hitler, and he is calling them. Britishers are still okay, they will go away. But to call Japanese and Hitler under any pretext is to finish whatever little hope is there for the nation. So this is the danger. Of course, Mother and Sri Aurobindo prevented it in an occult way, and they have hinted about it also. An opposite potency contradicting God, a momentary evil's almightiness, has straddled the straight path of nature's acts. So why the soul is unable to bring out? Because in nature there exists this opposite potency which straddles the straight path. It comes in the way. It imitates the Godhead it denies. Wonderful example we have. There are very violent ideologies which say that all men are equal. And if you don't see through it, you can be carried away. It's a very profound truth. We all want a world where all men are equal. But if you look into the heart and what their way of life is, with kangaroo courts and violence And anybody who even raises a voice against that ideology is slain and put aside, skulls buried under heaps of sand. But the Nara is very good. All men are equal. Brotherhood, universal brotherhood. There is only one God, and all of us are brothers. But who are these all? All who believe in my one God. Who are the others? Infidels to be slain and cast aside. See how they can come. They are imitating the Godhead they deny. At one place, Mother says, many of these religions, at the head of them there stands an Asura. She is frank and forthright. All is not same. We can't say, but they speak very nicely. That, well, there is only one God. There was once a good friend. He would often greet others and, even me with that very nice, very beautiful Sai Baba's Nara, Sabka Malik Ek. He was a nice saint. Sabka Malik Ek. So I would reply, Ar wo keval jo mera malik hai. So, that's how these forces work. By saying that, yes, there is only one God. But that God, secretly, that's the name that I call him with. And those who believe in that God, there is only one God. They say it. Very nice thing to hear. All are brothers because we are all children of that God. But secretly there is a whole exclusion and violence going on. So these are they imitate. It imitates the Godhead it denies. Puts on his figure and assumes his face. You can buy peace. They'll say, look how peaceful my citizens are. Nobody raises a voice. There is justice by the sword. Anyone who steals, hands are cut. So there is justice. You can't deny it, justice. But something in you revolts against this justice. You feel perhaps stealing is a lesser problem than chopping off your hands if you have stolen. Or throwing stones if you have committed adultery and killing a person. You feel perhaps adultery is a much lesser thing than killing somebody. And that's why, Christ gave this wonderful message. What are you doing? You raise a stone if first look into your own hearts. But these are worlds, there are people and they say it. Yes, God is just. He punishes sin. So it will look very convincing. So it imitates, puts on God's face. A Manichean, creator and destroyer. This, of course, there was a Manichean comes from money, not our money, but Persian money. So he was a prophet against, what kind of prophet we can understand, who said that, there is God and there is Satan. And God is basically omnipotent, but in front of Satan, he can lose his powers and he need not be omnipotent. So there is, eventually it came into that two realms, realm of God and there is the realm of evil. And he can't do anything about this evil. You can make a choice living in that realm or living in this realm. Later on, this philosophy came to be regarded as those people who draw a very rigid line between good and bad. This is good, this is bad. There is no shades in between. It's a very dangerous way to look at life. The mother speaks of this in one of her conversations. She says, basically the problem with men who try to create perfection by the mind is that they reduce perfection to a certain set of qualities or virtues and they exclude everything else from life. It's very dangerous. But Manicheans were like that. And they were a major religion which had gone right up to China from Persia, and it had also traveled westward into Europe. And it was regarded at one point from 7th to 14th century as a major threat to Christianity. But there were Manichean churches and all this. Eventually it has gone away. Now hardly anyone knows. But something of that survives in man. When we trenchantly divide life into these two parts and punish that and uphold this, then we are basically being Manichean. Manichean, creator and destroyer. This can abolish man, annul his world. This is the dark and dangerous thing which, if man was just a human being, there is hope. Even with the animal, there is fine. But he has Rakshasas and Asuras sleeping inside. Kumkaran, who is lying asleep. Once woken, you can't put him to sleep. 6 months he is going to remain alert and awake. So this is the story, but let's not be worried or afraid, or it's a very some people after reading it can get terrified, but there is nothing to feel terrified, because but there is a guardian power, there are hands that save. Calm eyes divine regard the human scene. From this whole passage, these two lines are worth remembering. Others are there, we know, but we should always know that both in the individual and in the nation and in upon this earth, divine is there and he watches. And we don't know when he will intervene, but there is an hour of intervention. And he gives sometimes a long rope. When mother was asked, why does the divine allow asuras to do all this? The mother gave a very interesting reply. Perhaps it is the fastest way to take them to their final destination. They create carnage and everything. And the divine says, okay, now you are coming to the end of the road. Run a little faster. So the fellow doesn't realize. He thinks at the end of the road I am going to have the heavens. But it's the brink, the abyss. Run a little faster. And then when he goes into the abyss, divine says, fine, go back. Your time is over. Up. Now I am going to take care of this world. So there is the guardian power which saves. We should lean on that. More and more we should lean on that. But there is a guardian power. There are hands that save. Calm eyes divine regard the human scene. How powerful these lines are. And we can make it a whole yoga. That's what Sri Aurobindo meant when he said, live always as if you were under the very eyes of the Divine Mother. Just to live with this thought that she is watching over us. Whatever we are doing, whatever we are thinking, whatever we are feeling, we should always keep this in mind that she is there. It will change our life. This is the one rule which Sri Aurobindo had given, and Nalinida writes that in different paths there are different rules, do's and don'ts, proscriptions and prescriptions. But in this yoga there is one rule that is called as the golden rule. It is a beautiful talk of Nalinida. What is that rule? Because no other rules are there. Don't eat this, don't do this, do this. There are, of course, later on, mother did give some rules, but very unhappily. She said, I don't like to give rules, but since everybody is asking, I have to give some rules. So she gave 4 rules. And that too she still allowed. There was a lot of leeway. But one rule which Sri Aurobindo gave, which used to come on the prosperity booklet. Now there are a lot of rules, sub-rules, clause, this, that, sounds like a legal document. But there was a time when the prosperity book carried only one rule. If you go into the history, you will see it. What was the rule? Live always as if you were under the eyes of the Divine Mother. Do nothing, try to think and feel nothing which would be unworthy of the Divine Presence. One rule. Nalinida calls it the golden rule. And even till date, if anything can really be saved, it is by that one rule. So we have this rule, but there is a guardian power. There are hands that save. Calm eyes divine regard the human scene. We should call the divine when we are ever caught up in the play of these forces. This is the only way to call the mother, ma, 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 like a madman call. If there is madness, call it like a madman. And it works. The unfortunate part is that when the soul is dislodged, the thought sequences are disrupted, and when one is not practiced it when one was in a happy state, then even this becomes difficult. It's a sad tragedy. If there is a tragedy, this is the tragedy. But if one really calls the Divine Mother in these states, when one is under the grip of these forces, then one escapes. This too I have seen. Really, she carries you through everything and you come out. And come out unscathed and stronger by the darkness. Like Krishna and Arjuna go through the dark spot, through the dark passage. And when they emerge, Arjuna becomes wiser and stronger. But that is very rare. One should not wait for this moment. All the world's possibilities in man are waiting as the tree waits in its seed. So when a baby is born, of course, everybody is celebrating. What we forget is all the world's possibilities are waiting. We don't know what's going to come out of it. We can give, we can try to, that was the whole idea of sanskar, that when a child, these things have not yet come up. It's like treat the plant before it grows into a tree infested with fungus and all this. So sanskars meant this, that the child grows up so that these things are there, but they will not, hopefully not infest the life so badly. His past lives in him, it drives his future space. His present acts fashion his coming fate. The unborn gods hide in his house of life. So one side we have seen the dark nether deeps, denizens. These are there, which Freud discovered and which was well known to Indian thought thousands of years back. But Freud took the credit, it's okay. But what he didn't discover or couldn't discover is that there are also the unborn gods. This is a discovery also we had made, that there is on one side the denizens of the dark, but there are also gods waiting to be born, which is given so beautifully in a story in the Taittiriya Upanishad. The gods are sleeping, they also can be awakened. The demons of the unknown overshadow his mind, casting their dreams into live molds of thought, the molds in which his mind builds out its world. So these sleeping energies, the unborn gods, the forces of darkness, even when there is a child, in a child, they are slowly casting their influence. We don't get to know. Of course, rishis can see it. That's why they can say, looking at a child, when Vyasa Rishi was asked, when Duryodhana was born with all this and with 100 brothers, and Vyasa Rishi was asked, he said, throw this child away. Sounds very harsh. Shishupal, same thing. Don't keep this child. This child will grow up to be a terror, a demon. But he is kept. And of course, that is also necessary because it has its part in the world play. So they begin to cast their influence very early. That's why many customs in Indian thought were very interesting, very nice. Like when a child was small, now we have this crib culture that, there is a strange thought that when a baby is small, put the baby in the crib so that he'll become independent very soon. This is an absurd thought because to start with, even Western psychology says that first 3 years, the baby needs to have a sense of security which comes through contact comfort. It's a well-known thing. So children whose mothers holds them close, it gives them the sense of security and comfort. When they grow up and go into the world, they go as confident human beings. Whereas those who are kept like with the crib culture, there is hardly any interaction. These children may be independent, but they are very insecure, very fragile inside, and that makes a dangerous combination. A person who is independent but very fragile inside can be a deadly combination because to prove his point, he will do many things. But there are other things also. That the mother's presence, simply because she is so full of love and goodwill for the child, it's a shield against many, many forces which will otherwise creep by. This is what we see in the story of Putna. For a few moments, Yashoda Ma goes away, allows some other lady to handle the child. Of course, we should understand not to make it into a superstition, but just the truth behind it. And this lady says, can I give my milk to the child? Why not? You have such a motherly feeling. And she has poisoned her breasts and poisons Krishna. So there are influences like that. This story, of course, is a way of saying how when we are still in the infancy of the soul, these forces creep near us and try to finish us. And we have to be so conscious and careful. At least when the child is small, it's the responsibility of the parents to try to make sure that these influences do not come later on of the teacher. His mind creates around him its universe. They can't do anything with the soul, but they will influence the mind, and that mind creates his universe. All that has been renews in him its birth. All that can be is figured in his soul. So whatever was the past keeps on renewing itself. But the unborn gods are also there. He has eventually a destiny. Everyone has a beautiful future, but that is prefigured inside the soul. It's guarded, safe inside, waiting for its hour. Issuing in deeds its codes on the roads of the world, obscure to the interpreting reason's guess, lines of the secret purpose of the gods. Now Sri Aurobindo takes us to a vaster level. That slowly as the person grows, child grows, then this influence of the mind starts issuing in deeds. So, we wonder why a juvenile committed such a ghastly thing like rape. They commit murders. Now even people have gone to this extent, the perversity, that because the juveniles are exempted from certain punishment, they have only 3 year sentence. So people use the juveniles, give them money to kill. It came out, it's there happening because juveniles can't be punished. Now human right activists cannot understand all this because reason cannot understand all this phenomena. Reason sees only a very superficial layer. It cannot see the darker forces which are at work. It doesn't mean that people have to be punished by life sentence or death. Certainly not. But there has to be a serious engagement with children who have gone through this kind of perverse drift. It cannot be just 3 years in a reformatory. It has to be a serious engagement, probably a lifetime commitment to help them come out, to convert them, which needs really in real effort, serious effort, not just a piece of paper of law. So these drifts begin to slowly show up as deeds. And the reason cannot understand it. Yet behind all this there is a secret purpose of the gods. In strange directions runs the intricate plan. Held back from human foresight is their end. And the far intention of some ordering will or the order of life's arbitrary chance finds out its subtle poise and fated hour. So yet behind all this there is a grand plan. There is a very nice poem of Sri Aurobindo. All poems are nice, of course. One of them is, how to segregate. It's a poem called Rakshasa. So, in that poem there is a very interesting kind of dialogue, which I don't know where it takes place, in which Purana it is documented. So, but it's there that the great rishis go to the Lord's seat and pray to Krishna that Ravana is creating chaos in this world. Please do something about it. And Krishna laughs and says, he has another 1,000 years to rule. What? 1,000 years to rule? Yes, because he also must have his own fair time. Fair time. Yes, every force, every tendency has to have its say. So now it's the time of Ravana, please go and sleep in peace. Now these are the 7 rishis who are guiding the world movement, so they are all confused. He said, but tell us something must come. He says, well, the time will come when he will fall. But he will fall to either a animal or man. And then Sri Aurobindo says, this is the story of evolutionary progression. So first the Rakshasa has its way. Then the Asura. Asura is mentalized Rakshasa. Rakshasa are those who do deeds. Asuras are the masterminds. Thought behind the deeds. Asura impels the Rakshasa. Marich, go and kill. Subahu, go and kill. He is impelling everyone. Kumkaran, even his brothers, go and kill. If you come, but Asuras will not do that. He is the mastermind. And they will go. And last, he has to fall. But his time comes when he has to be surpassed, not by another Asura. but by the animal consciousness or a mentalized human being. This is a story of evolution. So, in that whole planning, it has its place. Even in our evolutionary journey, we start, Sri Aurobindo in Records of Yoga speaks of the 10 types of gradations of humanity, and he starts from the Rakshasic type, etc., and going up to the Deva type. And in ancient time, again in India, there used to be this mix and match. So it was done through those days Shadi.com. And what was the Shadi.com? How many guns, whether you are a Deva type or a Rakshasa type or an Asura type. Now, these terms, we have lost its meaning, of course, and they become pejorative, misused, and a new kind of knowledge will come which is much greater. That is a different story. But the truth behind all this was this, that there are different, though all human beings are same or more or less similar, yet there is a whole evolutionary gradation with which humanity has to go through. And that's what is being pointed out, that all these gods, and since reason cannot understand it, it cannot understand why this happens, why people suddenly show up certain signs, why they have to go through in a certain life, certain kinds of experiences, and they become criminals, they become, they lose their balance, why it happens. So it's part of a plan which the mind cannot understand. Our surface, vast in vain by reason's gaze, invaded by the impromptus of the unseen, helpless records the accidents of time, the involuntary turns and leaps of life. So reason cannot understand all this because it cannot dive below the surface and see the forces at play. So it can only record that that these things have happened. Why they happened, it will give some superficial understanding, but can never understand the deeper forces which were at play. When North Korea, of course even now it's ruled by a madman, it's a country with, they are shut out from the world, no internet, live in their own balloon. And the fellow ruled by a young 32, 35-year-old man who decides one day, my defense minister didn't salute me, shoot him. Next day he drops dead. His most close prime minister is killed. Why? Because he raised his voice, Ravana was better. So when all this thing was going on, North Korea, South Korea and America intervention, so Amal Kiran asked Sri Aurobindo for his views. And all kinds of things. No, one should not intervene, it's their fight. Why should another country intervene? All this was going on, And Sri Aurobindo writes, the whole affair is as plain as a pikestaff. It's not just North Korea fighting South Korea. Behind him stands China with its ambition and aggressive plans to dominate the world over. It's only a little front. And if you allow it, if you don't intervene now, then it will have its way. How he could see so clearly, see through the entire propaganda of Nazi Germany. Men, great leaders, patriots, they couldn't see all this. Even in ashram there were well-wishers that it will be very nice if Germany wins. Because many of them were revolutionary leaders. And Sri Aurobindo tells them, if you want me to close the ashram, tell me directly. Don't wait for the Nazis to come and do it. So they said, but where are the Nazis coming to the ashram? He said, if you encourage, this will be what will happen. Because he will be fed by this thought. Right at the seat of the power, the divine power. So man cannot understand the deeper causes. We analyze superficially. And therefore we say accidents of time or give some outer reason. But there are always deeper reasons and deeper causes which the mind cannot fathom. So we'll continue with that tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the last sessions because 28th is a program in Playground. You must watch. And tomorrow, because there will be an early dinner being Saturday, so probably we'll have one longish session followed by a short meditation because dining room will close by 7 o'clock. That's for tomorrow.